material they were meant to read before this. So I'm going to pass you over to Anne, and we'll come up for air in about 2-3 hours' time.
We're just going to make a short introduction of her anyway.
Okay.
This great. So, Anne Harrison is one of the most renowned legal experts in the music industry, and over the past 30 years she's represented high-profile artists and writers, record labels, managers, independent publishers, and given legal advice to executives. She started out as a commercial litigation lawyer before switching to the entertainment industry, specialising in music. And she now runs her own legal consultancy, Harrison, which was set up in May 2003. And she's also a regular lecturer on music business and law. And her book, Music the Business, which I know a lot of you have, is the leading textbook on music business courses in the UK. And she's also a little companion. And we're very happy that you are. So we also ask you please not to tweet during the session. So without any further ado, Anne Harrison.
Don't clap before I start. It might be people who see. I've asked that you perhaps don't tweet. I've asked for the screen to be off because I find it quite distracting when people are thinking clever things to say on their tweets rather than engaging with me. And one of the great things about this class, which I do pretty much every year, is the feistiness that I get from the students and their ability to argue with me and challenge me and tell me I'm talking rubbish, which is exactly what I want. The last thing that someone comes here and talks to you wants is a row of faces looking at computer screens and not engaging. So please, I will leave time for questions at the end, but please don't save up all your questions till then. If I say something that you disagree with, please say so. If you've got something to add to what I'm saying, please say so. This is an interactive session and I don't mind being stopped at any point to be contradicted or preferably agreed with. How we're going to plan today's session is in two halves. The first half is going to be a brief introduction from me and then I'm going to focus on new models in the recording industry. We're going to then take a fag or loo break or whatever you want to call it, 10-15 minutes, and then we'll come back and in the second half we're going to look at income streams in music publishing and brand and sponsorship. I will leave time, as I say, for questions at the end, but I do hope that we will have addressed most of your concerns along the way, and it's only your fault if I haven't, because you have phones in your heads and you can tell me so. Okay? Because I come here very regularly, I was looking back at my notes as to what I said the last time I came here, because I tend to sort of predict things and then I look back to see how wildly out I was. And the last time I came here was 2 years ago, and I made a sort of series of predictions then. And 2 years ago, we were just starting to see some green shoots of recovery in our business. We were starting to see some means by which the industry was finally starting to get to grips with the online world and how to do business with people who had no history of musical creativity in their background, in other words, the telecoms companies. We were also starting to see different models emerging, but in a very piecemeal fashion. Streaming was an alternative means of consuming music, but by no means the main one. That, for me, when I look back at where we are at now, is the huge difference that has happened in the last 2 years, and it just shows how nimble on your feet you have to be in this business. Because 2 years ago, you would not have envisaged just quite how many people now only consume their music through streaming. students in the room to put their hands up how many of them were downloading and how many were doing so illegally. And almost every hand in the room would go up and say they were illegally downloading. Well, you're students, that's what I would have expected. I would hope by the time you came out of this course that you'd realise that illegal downloading is actually undermining your own futures, but that's a separate matter. If I ask that same question now, how many people in this room actually mostly consume music by way of downloads? How many by streaming, Spotify, Deezer? Okay. And how many of those that consume music by streaming pay a subscription? Now that is interesting. That is a significant shift from 2 years ago. When I asked this question of this group 2 years ago, you were all doing streaming, but none of you were paying for it. You were all doing the free, listen to the ads and see how it goes. The big challenge, obviously, is converting as many people as possible to paid subscription models. We were discussing this briefly before we started this morning, and the dream ticket for the industry is if everybody signs up to subscriptions, because it'll be like Sky TV. You buy your Sky package, it doesn't matter whether you ever watch the Sky Sports or the Sky Films, you bought it anyway. That's the dream ticket for this industry. There are not any signs in any significant way in the industry itself that it is converting to paid subscriptions. But I am very interested to see that you guys are, because let's face it, you're going to be at the cutting edge when you're students. That is what you're going to do. And if you are putting your hard-earned cash into actually buying subscriptions, that's saying something about where this industry is going. We are also seeing a sea change in how the government is viewing the creative industries. There is an election coming, in case we hadn't all noticed, and all of a sudden the government is deciding to take an interest in things that they think might win them votes. Why else is everybody who has any ambitions of wandering around in ways around in the Thames Valley at the moment? It's because they want our votes. Didn't come when Sheffield was underwater, I noticed. But anyway. The film industry has always got the ear of government and huge, massive subsidies. Never quite understood how they managed to pull that off. Why they are always treated as very different in the film industry is historical and is set in stone, and everybody seems to think that the film industry needs a helping hand, the music industry does not. It's quite flattering in its way that they think that we can commercially stand on our own 2 feet, but quite frankly, we have struggled to do so in the last 5 years. Illegal downloading has crippled this industry, and it's only now that we're starting to turn the corners. And it's now that the industry, that the government is deciding it's going to boost us and provide money for the creative industries and music, and issue statements that say, do you realise how much we are making in exports with the music industry in this country? How much, if we could foster 10 Adeles, just think how much more money we would make in exports in this country, right? So all of a sudden, we are a sexy subject to be associated with. And okay, fine, we'll ride with that until the election's over, and then they'll probably forget us again. But in terms of the other side of the coin, we are seeing a lot of new laws coming through at the moment in our industry, which are almost entirely Europe-driven. And that is obviously another big shift, is that we are not as in control of our own destiny anymore. What they say in Brussels tends to filter down to us at some point. There was a report in 2011 by a gentleman called Hargreaves, who didn't know our industry and didn't understand our industry. But unfortunately, his report is very influential, and all his recommendations are slowly being taken on board, whether we like them or not. Now, one of the positive upsides of this, from the recording industry's point of view, is an extension in the recording copyright of another 20 years. That came into effect last November. And what may not be interesting to you guys, but to geeky lawyers like me was very interesting, is how they chose to deal with this extra 20 years. There was very, very significant lobbying from, amongst others, the wonderful Cliff Richard, some people call it Cliff Richard law, because his recordings were starting to grow out of copyright because they were made more than 50 years ago. We also started to see some of the early Pink Floyds and the early Beatles coming out of copyright. It didn't matter so much with Pink Floyd and the Beatles because they'd written their own songs, and therefore they still had a lengthy copyright period left on their songs. However, Cliff Richard does not write his own songs, and so therefore once his recordings went out of copyright, so did his income. And he and various other people lobbied, and as a consequence we now do have an extra 20 years. But it's been dealt with very interestingly in that, say you were an artist and at the end of the 50 years you had a debt on your account with the record company of 20 grand, they can't use the income they earn in that extra 20 years. The record labels can't apply it to that 20 grand debt. It's wiped off, they've got to start again. First time we've ever done that with copyright law. The second thing is that the government has insisted that there is a fund of 20% of the revenues earned in this extra 20 years to be set aside for session musicians, to be administered by a body as yet unspecified, probably one of the collection societies, who will decide what is to happen and which of the session musicians are going to benefit from this. And there is also a very interesting one called Use It or Lose It. If at the end of the 50 years the record label is doing nothing with the recordings, and you're the artist on those recordings, you serve a notice and you say, unless you do something with these